is Sara, and I'm going to talk to you about Webpack. I call this talk the Hitchhiker's Guide to Webpack because I think learning Webpack is a voyage by itself. It's not entirely an easy thing to understand, so I think it's an actual trip. And what I'm going to try to do in this is use a real-life project and try to walk you through the steps of what each thing means in Webpack and what you can actually do with it, because let's be real, who in here has used Webpack? Okay, did any of you actually build a Webpack config file from the start? Exactly, neither have I in like 2 months. So I decided to actually learn what Webpack is about. So my name is Sara Vieira. I am NikitaFTW on GitHub, on Twitter, sorry, and I'm Sara Vieira on GitHub. I work for Mindera, that's our logo. I brought a lot of stickers, so if you like the logo, you can grab yourself a couple of stickers. In Mindera, I work for TVG. We're a betting company that's a part of Betfair, and that's the view from our office. It's not very clear, but it's pretty, I promise. Okay, I'm from Portugal. You may have known us as the team that won the Euro Cup. Nobody actually knows how, but we won. And since the Pope came to visit, we won Eurovision, which had never happened, and my football team won their 4th Portuguese league in a row, which had never happened. So I think we've been blessed. I'm not a Christian, but I think we're blessed, so I think this talk's gonna be fine. You're all gonna learn Webpack, and we're gonna have some fun. No one here is Portuguese, right? Okay, so no one's gonna hate me for the Benfica part, cool. Okay, what is Webpack? Webpack is a module bundler. You may have used Gulp or Grunt, or I think there was Broccoli too. Webpack is not a task runner. Webpack is a module bundler. By that it means that Webpack gets all your assets, even the ones that the browser can't read, like JSX for React. The browser can't read that, it's not JavaScript. And it transpiles them in a way that the browser can read. So it transpiles ES6 to normal old JavaScript. It transpiles less to CSS, post CSS to actual CSS, anything that the browser can actually read. It also has a lot of other cool tools like the module replacement, the dev server, stuff like that. Okay. Cool. So the project that we are building, that I'm showing you what steps are necessary, is going to use React, ESLint, ES6, CSS modules, post CSS, and also other linting stuff. Because linting is the seatbelt of front-end programming, and you need linting, otherwise, yeah. Weird stuff is going to start happening. So that's the folder structure, just has a source, components, stuff like that, package JSON, and post CSS config. I'll get through all of this, how to configure post CSS, how to configure Webpack, and how to configure ESLint. Okay, so install Webpack. Installing Webpack in a project is really easy, so after you do npm init or before you do npm init, just run npm install webpack --save dev, or in yarn terms, I'm going to use yarn for this, but it's pretty much the same thing. Since you write less, there's less possibilities that I'm going to make a typo, so I just use yarn. So yarn add webpack --dev, this equals to npm install webpack --save dev. Okay, create a Webpack config. What is a Webpack config? It's a JavaScript file that essentially exports an object. So you can actually name it a const or something and export that object, that variable, or you can actually do module.exports. This is completely up to you. The only thing that it needs to do is export an object with all your configuration. Okay, so first thing you need is an entry file. So your project needs to start somewhere. So basically in React is usually the main component that is actually in the, it gets transpiled into a DOM element. So in this case, it's sourced at index.jsx. This is going to be where Webpack enters and going to do all of his magic. We also need an output. In this case, I required path so I can know exactly where I am and don't get lost in the file system. Since this runs in Node, it has access to path. So I named it bundle.js, and I resolved to the dir name that I'm currently in and the dist folder. And so there's bundle.js in the dist folder that contains all of our stuff. Problem, Webpack can't read anything. He doesn't even know where anything is. Webpack is not a smart thing. Webpack needs to be taught how to do everything. So first thing that I usually do is resolve extensions. So what resolve extensions does is if you put something like component / Codemotion, it's going to look for several extensions. It's going to look for JS, and it's going to look for JSON, I think, by default. But we're going to use JSX, and we're going to use CSS. So I'm going to say resolve resolve the extensions to .js, .jsx, and .css. So you don't actually need to put the extensions if you're using one of these. If you're using JSON, for example, just throw in some JSON in that array, and you don't need to put the last part. It's always going to look for this. Otherwise, you have to type index.jsx every time, and it's not very fun. We're trying to improve developer experience by creating config files. Okay, so next part is the modules. So the modules is the little parts of your application that are written in several languages, or like the HTML, like CSS, and like JavaScript. You need to create these little modules that are test for these things and run certain loaders in it so that the browser can actually read it. Is everyone following me? Did this make sense? Okay, cool. Okay, so you have the rules. The rules are exactly that. So we test for a certain pattern. So like this, you're testing for JSX. So you add the Babel core, and Babel loader. Babel and Babel core are basically what you need as a core of Babel. And the Babel loader is for Webpack. So it's the loader that Webpack uses to actually transpile this back into JavaScript that the browser can read. And you test for anything that ends in JSX, and you use the Babel loader for this. Problem, it's not going to do anything yet. That's mainly the problem with Webpack. It takes a lot of file creating. We're not used to that. So, second part, create a Babel file. You can do this in your package.json. You can actually do this in Webpack, but I think in the Webpack config, but I think it's always better to separate your concerns. Excuse me. So, install the preset env. What preset env is, does anybody ever used auto prefixer in CSS? Do you know what it is? It basically adds your prefixes for older browsers. So what this does is exactly the same thing, but for JavaScript. So basically you say modules false because you don't want Babel to do your modules, you want Webpack to do your modules. Targets node current. The node current simply means that this is not going to run on the server, so you don't need like to target node 5. This is not necessary, so you can just use the current node, so the latest version. And browsers, we said the latest 3 versions of every browser is going to be supported, and the latest 4 iOS versions. This is a default. You can change this. You can not support anything. You can just support the latest browsers. And I think the last of 4 iOS versions is really important. The company that I work in, we make iOS apps, and they keep running into issues in iOS 8 and stuff like that. So we always implement stuff like really far back in the iOS versions because Safari is kind of the new IE now. And React, I think that's pretty self-explanatory. React stuff. So, parse images. Okay, so you have URL loader. What the URL loader does is pretty cool. So you test for JPEG, PNG, and SVG standards, and you say, okay, I want to use this loader that is the URL loader. And then you have an option called limits. This is the limit of size that the image is going to have. So if the image is smaller than 10,000 Ks, that image is not going to be an HTTP request. That image is going to be data 64-bit stuff that's going to be pasted into your code, basically into your CSS or into your HTML, which some people say it's bad since the same image in PNG and the same image in data 64 is actually heavier in data 64 than it is in PNG. But I think it's kind of a trade-off, so you get one less HTTP request, but you get a couple more bytes. So it's kind of what you want to do. You can use file loader instead of URL loader, and it just loads you the file if you don't want to do any of this stuff, and that's totally fine. So you now have a JS file that runs in the browser, and you have images in your JS file. Amazing. Crazy stuff. Parse CSS. So I'm going to use post CSS for this. You can use less. There's a SAS loader, there's a less loader, there's everything loader, don't worry about it. And so for this we need to install the style loader. What the style loader does is transform your styles into the style tag in JS in React. So normally in React you don't have a JS file and a CSS file. You have one file, and that file already contains the CSS. So that's what the style loader does. The CSS loader basically loads CSS. That's it. The post CSS loader transforms post CSS into actual CSS that the browser can read, and post CSS needs to be installed because you need to install it. It's a dependency of post CSS loader. Okay, so this one is a little bigger. So we're testing for every CSS file. Inside of every CSS file, we go from, Okay, I was told there was a pointer here, amazing. So we go from this loader, it starts in this one, and it ends in this one. Why does it go from bottom to top? I don't know, because we started from the bottom and now we're here, I guess. So post CSS loader is the first one, because what we're entering in the CSS is not valid CSS. The browser can't read that because we're using like something like CSS next, or we're using imports, or we're using stuff variables, and not every browser can read this. So we use the post CSS loader, and what the post CSS loader is gets your post CSS and transforms it into CSS. Amazing. And then we use the CSS loader. What does the CSS loader do? So we have a couple of options here. The first one is modules. What is this? This actually tells you that you're using CSS modules. If you never use CSS modules, it's a way of writing React components. So instead of just like naming it a class name, so you name it class name hero, for example, and then in your CSS you call hero, you create a class called hero in your CSS, import that CSS into your JavaScript, and in your JavaScript call style.hero. And that alongside with, there we go, the local indent name will create a unique hash, base 64 with five characters, yeah, that's the word, with 5 characters that will pretty much be unbreakable. You can use 128 characters if you really want to. Local means your class ID or style or thingy name, whatever you named it, and a dash and hash, that base 64, and 5 carats. The cool thing about this is that you can completely customize this. I did this. This is the one we use because I don't want a really huge name. So we also have camel case. Camel case is the, you know, when you started writing CSS, they taught you to use dash separated stuff. And then React came along and everything was in camel case, and I hated that. And then I discovered that there was a camel case option. What does this do is create actually 2 objects. So you can write your CSS in dash separated, and then it transforms it into camel case. This sounds like a really little thing, but I was in love with this. This was amazing. I love this. And source maps, because source maps are important for you to debug, because React is not the coolest thing to debug in the world, and neither is Webpack. So style loader puts it in your JavaScript. Okay, set up CSS next. CSS next is basically future-proof CSS. So if you use Sass, less, whatever, it's basically, post-CSS is basically that. So there's a bunch of plugins that you can install in post-CSS that allow you to do small things. Like you want to use variables. There are plugins just for variables. You can install 100 plugins. And CSS next basically has all the things that you need. He has color functions, he has variables, he has nesting, all that stuff is in CSS next. So, and all of this stuff is going to be eventually used by CSS. So basically, when that plugin isn't needed, it's going to get removed from CSS next, and it's one less plugin that you have, and your browser will still read it. That's pretty cool. So you create a post CSS.config.js. This is going to be read by post CSS when it actually uses the loader, or when you run it in the CLI. You can actually run post CSS in the CLI. And then we're going to const CSS next, require the post CSS plugin, and use it as a plugin. This is going to make your code use CSS next and be able to use variables and everything will be pretty much supported by your browser. Okay, dev server. Dev server is a really cool thing that Webpack has, mainly because it's hot reloading. That means it doesn't actually reload your stuff. I work a lot in forms, so you have no idea how amazing this is. I used to have this Chrome extension that just filled forms because I got really lazy, and there was like 12 or 15 stops to type, and every single one of them had weird validation, so I had a Chrome plugin. Now we have Webpack. So, how do you actually do this? So, Webpack has a module called dev server. So you install dev server, amazing, and you go to Webpack config, and the default port is 8080. I changed, the port is actually here because 8080 doesn't run on my computer for some reason. I can't run localhost on 8080. Don't know why. Should I get my computer cleaned? Probably. So I set the port to 300. I set hot to true. What hot does is the hot reloading stuff where you don't actually need to reload your browser. And history API fallback equals true. What does this do? This uses the history API from HTML5, and it gives you the ability to not have to write. So you have your domain / and like the hashtag, and then another slash, and then the name. This uses the history API to you don't have to do that, so just your domain / about, for example. And this is what it does mainly on local stuff. And in the terminal, in your folder, just run webpack dev server. Hot means the same thing as in here, so you can actually remove it or just remove it from here. Inline, what inline does is change your things in line 2. So these two need to go together. And this is the output public path. I actually came to pretty much a lot of hate with this. So what does this do? The output public path tells Webpack where your output is. So sometimes it bundles, so if you create this and don't put your output path, what's going to happen is it's going to bundle, but it doesn't know where your dist is. It doesn't know where your bundle is, so it will never reload the server. And this tells you that it's in the dist folder, so it goes into this folder, you see that it's changed, and it reloads the server. So if you don't put this, he's not going to know where it is, and it can't reload the server. You can't do the hot reloading without knowing where your file is. This is the dev server. So now we're going to minify JavaScript, because JavaScript needs to be minified because it's huge. So you probably heard of Uglify.js. The problem with Uglify.js is it doesn't really understand ES6. So there's Babbly. I don't fancy the name very much either, but there's Babbly. And to actually add a plugin to Webpack, what you do is require that plugin and literally instantiate it. So in this case, there's the plugins and new Babbly plugin. This will automatically minify your code. You can set for environments, so you can actually set another environment to production and use if production, use Babbly. And this will minify your code, and Babbly understands ES6, so you won't have any problems with imports, exports, and stuff like that. Okay, so now we're going to add some awesomeness to this terminal. So there's a plugin called NyanProgressPlugin. You can pretty much see what this does. So you create a const, do the same thing, and what this does is does this when you're bundling Webpack. I use this in all my projects. Like my company took this out of like 3 projects. I put it back in because it's amazing. It's beautiful. Okay. I was told like 3 days ago there's a Webpack CLI. Amazing. The Webpack CLI is still in its early stages, so it creates you a really simplistic Webpack file. It's basically a starter file that you need to do things to actually use. And install it globally, so yarn global add Webpack CLI. This is the same as npm install -global Webpack CLI, and then you init it on the folder that you want. It will create a really simple starter boilerplate for your Webpack config, and then you can go online and search for more. And that's it about the Webpack CLI. Now we're going to do linting, because linting is important. And this cat is also very important. Okay, so lint to JavaScript. If you ever use ESLint has a really awesome thing called ESLint --init. What that does, that asks you a couple of questions about your style code, and then it creates your an ESLint file. Usually it installs these plugins, except the prettier plugin. So let me go to the thing here. This is actually ESLint. The configure BNB is the one that my company at least uses. It's a pretty cool config that NBRB created for themselves and then spread it all over the world. We have the plugin for React. This lints your React components, because normally ESLint doesn't understand React. We have the ESLint plugin Prettier. So remember when we uglified your code? This prettifies your code. So we make it prettier so then we can screw it up, basically. So this adds all the tabbing prettiness to your code, and if you try to make it, sets a defined thing that you need to set up, like in styles, sense like tabs and stuff like that. We have ESLint plugin import, because by default ESLint doesn't understand ES6 imports. So this looks for spelling errors. This looks for if the file exists or not. And god damn it, Google Docs. And we have ESLint plugin JSX A11i. This is accessibility for JSX. So it searches if all your images have an alt tag, if you're using H1s. It also searches if you're using on-clicks on divs, because you're not supposed to. You're supposed to use that on buttons, not on things that are not actually clickable. So that's what it does. And it installs this as a dev dependency. So your ESLint.js, assuming you chose the JS, you can actually save it as JSON or something like that. So it looks something like this. The env was set by me afterwards. This means that you're using it in the browser. So variables like window and document are global, and you don't get the weird error of document is not defined, because you know it's not defined, it's global. You don't need that. And it extends the Airbnb and uses React, for React, obviously, import for understanding imports, Prettier to make it everything things just look way nicer. And JSX A11 high, so accessibility. I think that's really important that we actually check for accessibility in React components, not just put everything just because it's shadowed down, because the people are still going to see it, and there are a lot of people who actually need this accessibility to use the internet. So I think it's really important to check for accessibility in this type of components. It also checks if you placed an A that doesn't have an href. It's just as a hashtag. That's not supposed to happen too. We're linting CSS now too. Yeah. Okay, because CSS is a mess. So there's this cool thing called StyleLint. So you install StyleLint, StyleLint config standard, and this style.fmt basically fixes StyleLint. So StyleLint is basically ESLint, but for CSS. So it's mostly for styling purposes, so tabs and see, okay, you forgot a space here, you forgot to close this, you forgot a comma here. And it also checks if you have a duplicate rule, if you are using too many IDs, you can make it check if you're using importance, and it does all sorts of stuff like that. And this FMIT fixes most of this. If you run this in the terminal, if you run StyleLint, it fixes most of your issues. So basically what you need to do is create a .stylelint.rc, and this extends StyleLint config standard. This is the standard config. There's an Airbnb config. There's all types of configs. I usually use this one and then add some rules like you can't use importance and you can't use IDs, stuff like that. And your CSS will be all pretty, I promise. It's going to be maintainable too, because you're going to use CSS modules. And CSS modules are pretty maintainable because they're for one component only, so they're like 50 lines of code max. You're not supposed to even have 50 lines of code for one component. You should divide that into several components. So I'm going to talk to you about two other awesome tools that I found that are particularly useful for dealing with linting and with Webpack. So one of them is Webpack Blocks. So if you ever used Gulp, you know Gulp as more of a pipe way of dealing with stuff. And Webpack Blocks uses that kind of way. So it's a functional building blocks for the Webpack config. If you don't like writing configs, because configs are not fun, basically, they're just objects and they're not fun at all, and you prefer doing something like this, it's completely doable. So what this does is it creates a config. You need to install the blocks. So basically Babel is a block, dev server is a block, post CSS is a block. You do the entry point, you do the output, and then you use Babel on JS. Each one of these functions is basically a rule, is basically one of those rules. So it tests, in this case, Babel, what it does, it tests for JS and JSX, and it runs the Babel. And if you have a Babel RC file, it's going to use those presets in all your files. And then, there we go. So post CSS, it's basically what we already created. Use our prefixer. In this case, CSS next already comes with our prefixer. Forgot to say that. And define const, so process, and create a dev server. It creates it more in a pipey way if you like to build this, make configs this way. So if you're a really big fan of Gulp. So basically Webpack kind of got the config is kind of like Grunt and this is kind of like Gulp, so the best of both worlds. And there's also this is amazing. This is called Lint Staged. So, you know when you have Git hooks, but Git hooks are really hard to maintain. Git hooks have a problem. So if you use like Flow or unit tests and Flow take a long time to run, assuming you have a lot of tests, assuming you don't have just 2 tests. What this does, it lints only your staged files. So basically Jest can do this. So if you just run in your staged files, it's just going to run the tests that are attached to those files. Flow can't, so you need to initialize the server still, but we're not using this with Flow yet because of that. You can also run ESLint. So ESLint -- fix, what it does is that it fixes your lint. Amazing. And you can also run the style FMT that fixes your styles. Git adds it, and you can run your tests. You can run anything you want in here, and make sure that your lint files are ready to go. This runs on commit, which is pretty cool. But you can run it on pre-push. Like this is pre-commit, it goes Lint Stage, but you can run it on pre-push. This looks for all your JS files. You can look for JSX files, and you can create another rule that looks for CSS files, and runs ESLint and git add. Always remember to add git add, because if you're fixing stuff, it's going to appear as modified. It's not going to add it. So at the end, you always need to add git add, assuming that you're going to do something wrong. Okay, so that's pretty much what I have. This is where all the code is, all the Webpack config. I'm also going to put the talk in here, no problem. And I think that's it. I don't know if you enjoyed it. You guys have any questions?
Anyone have any questions?
Do you use
So you have to speak louder because I'm kind of deaf from my left ear, don't know why.
Oh, sorry. Do you use Webpack for also other programming language besides JavaScript?
We only use...
As input and then...
I'm pretty sure you can find a loader for any language. We only use it for JavaScript, we use it for less, and we use it for CSS and images. That's the only thing we do. We use it for dev servers too, but no other languages. But I don't know what language were you looking for?
I don't know yet. We're using JavaScript and a similar setup too, but I was kind of looking maybe for alternatives for JavaScript.
Oh, you can use this with CoffeeScript, for instance. That is completely doable. You can use this with CoffeeScript. There are loaders for Vue, so that Vue, you can use like Vue templates. That's actually JavaScript, but it's a different format at the end. And you can use CoffeeScript. You can use a whole bunch of stuff. Like pretty much everything that's in the front end is supported, so that's not a problem. As long as there's a compiler for it, even in a CLI, somebody already wrote a loader. Somebody already wrote a loader. That was too fast, I'm sorry. There's probably a loader already. So you can change and just look on the web and there's probably already a loader.
Okay, thanks.
No problem. I think that's it, man.
That's it.
I think that's it, man.